Hello, Wellspring. Playing a little bit of catch up once again. Hopefully, we can get back on a better track here. But I'm playing catch up because I was away at youth camp and then ended up in my cousin's wedding, which was awesome for Tim and Sarah. I'm so happy for them. It was a beautiful wedding, but there was no internet access up there. We were out in the middle of the boonies, so I'm playing a little bit of a catch up. So today in this video, we are going to deal with our two readings from June 27th and June 28th. This is from the book of Ezekiel. So Ezekiel is set to become a priest in his time and space, but he finds himself being drug away in the first wave of Babylonian attacks against Israel as an exile. And he's exiled with the Israelites who are taken from Jerusalem. Now, the city has not yet been destroyed. That's still coming, but the Babylonians have taken a number of the prisoners of war, and Ezekiel's included in that. And so the book of Ezekiel actually opens up in chapter 1 with about a 5 year window since Ezekiel's been in exile in Babylon. And he's on his 30th birthday, which would have been the time for him when he would have been welcomed into being a full fledged priest, where he would have been able to have the roles necessary because he would have attained the age of responsibility for that space. He would have been considered a full fledged man in the culture, would have been able to give testimony in a court of law, would have been able to read and teach from the synagogue or from the temple, right? And prior to that, he wouldn't have been there. But here on his 30th birthday, he's sitting by this irrigation system uh, outside of one of the main hubs of Babylon, right? And he gets a vision from the Lord. And in this vision, he begins to see God's glory and the power and the weight of God's magnificence. And he has a vision of God's presence showing up. And so, as he begins to wrestle with this vision, the next large chunk of Ezekiel then moves into this space where he, like Isaiah, is talking about the failure and the idolatry and the lack of covenant obedience by the people of Israel, by the people of Judah and Jerusalem, and that Babylon is coming to enact God's justice on them. And though Babylon is not righteous or not holy, God is using Babylon to enact um, the natural consequences of Israel's sin, right? And then Ezekiel transitions into a space where he starts talking about some of the kings of other great people groups like the Egyptians and the people group of Tyre, and how these kings have set themselves up as deities. And Israel has been infected by worship of false gods from both Egypt and Tyre, and how it's infected Israel, and how God is going to use Babylon to judge those nations as well. And we get this heavy looming presence of the judgment and the wrath due to of God being stored up against sin, that's being poured out through Babylon, that's being poured out in order to refine and refresh Israel, because they are so fallen and depraved and they've hardened their hearts. And then Ezekiel moves into a space where he begins to talk about, like Jeremiah, I'm sorry, yeah, like Jeremiah and Isaiah talked about, like there's spaces where God is going to perform a new work, particularly Jeremiah, like with the potter um, crushing down the clay to build something new. God is going to take these hard hearts of the Israelites and give them a heart of flesh. He's going to remove their heart of stone and give them a heart of flesh. And there will be a remnant that God will hold for his people. God will watch over them. God will care for them. God will restore them. And then we get to the end of the book of Ezekiel, and we see more promises of that hope coming. And then there's hope for the other nations, the surrounding nations, Philistia. My brain is slipping on the other names right now. Ammon, I forget. They're slipping right now from my brain. But the other nations that surround Israel, some of the smaller nations, and then eventually that there's a hope for the entire world that will come through the Messiah, that will come through the work of God. And so that kind of gives you the premise, the overall scope of Ezekiel. Obviously, there's a lot more in it to dig into. But for this video, we're going to do, like I said, the two readings for June 27th and 28th. So we're going to read Ezekiel chapter 1, and then we're going to jump to Ezekiel chapter 37. So let's dig into it. This is the NIV. In my 13th year, in the 4th month of the 5th day, while I was among the exiles by the Kabar River, the heavens were opened, and I saw visions of God. On the 5th of the month, it was the 5th year of exile of King Jehoiakim, the word of the Lord came to Ezekiel the priest, the son of Buzi, by the Kabar River, in the land of the Babylonians. There the hand of the Lord was on him. I looked and I saw a windstorm coming out of the north, an immense cloud with flashing lightning and surrounded by brilliant light. The center of the fire looked like a glowing metal, and in the fire was what looked like 4 living creatures. In appearance, their form was human, but each of them had 4 faces and 4 wings. Their legs were straight, their feet were like those of a calf, and gleamed like burnished bronze. Under their wings, on their 4 sides, they had human hands. All 4 of them had faces and wings, and the wings of one touched the wings of another. Each one went straight ahead, and they did not turn as they moved. Their faces looked like this. Each of the 4 had the face of a human being, and on the right side each had the face of a lion, and on the left side the face of an ox. Each also had the face of an eagle. Such were their faces. These each had 2 wings spreading out upward, each wing touching that of the creature on either side, and each had 2 other wings covering its body. Each one went straight ahead. Wherever the Spirit would go, they would go, without turning as they went. The appearance of the living creatures was like burning coals of fire, or like torches. Fire moved back and forth among the creatures. It was bright, and lightning flashed out of it. The creatures spread back and forth like flashes of lightning. As I looked at the living creatures, I saw a wheel on the ground beside each creature, with its 4 faces. This was the appearance and the structure of the wheels. They sparkled like topaz, and all 4 looked alike. Each appeared to be made like a wheel intersecting a wheel. As they moved, they would go in any one of the 4 directions the creatures faced. The wheels did not change direction as the creatures went. Their rims were high and awesome, and all 4 rims were full of eyes all around them. When the living creatures moved, the wheels beside them moved. And when the living creatures rose from the ground, the wheels also rose. Wherever the Spirit would go, they would go, and the wheels would rise along with them. Because the spirit of the living creatures was in the wheels, when the creatures moved, they also moved. When the creatures stood still, they also stood still. When the creatures rose from the ground, the wheels rose along with them, because the spirit of the living creatures was in the wheels. Spread out above the heads of the living creatures was what looked like something like a vault, sparkling crystal and awesome. Under the vault, their wings were stretched out one toward the other, and each had 2 wings covering its body. When the creatures moved, I heard the sound of their wings like the roar of rushing waters, like the voice of the Almighty, like the tumult of an army. When they stood still, they lowered their wings. Then there came a voice from above the vault over their heads as they stood with lowered wings. Above the vault over their heads was what looked like a throne of lapis lazuli, and high above on the throne was a figure like that of a man. I saw that from what appeared to be his waist up looked glowing like metal, as if full of fire, and that from there down he looked like fire, and brilliant light surrounded him. Like the appearance of a rainbow in the clouds on a rainy day, so was the radiance around him. This was the appearance of the likeness of the glory of the Lord. When I saw it, I fell face down and heard the voice of one speaking. Yeah, so here, like I said, we get this expression from Ezekiel about the glory of the Lord and seeing kind of the spirit of the Lord at the center of these 4 creatures. And then Ezekiel recognizes God's greatness and the weight of his glory and falls face down to worship the Lord and then hears from the Lord. Then, like I said, we get this section where Ezekiel goes into kind of the judgment of Israel, and then it transitions into some hope by the end of the book about what God is going to do to restore the people. So now we're going to jump ahead to chapter 37 of Ezekiel, and this may be a familiar passage, and it kind of talks about this hope that comes. And even though we are spiritually dead, God is able to raise us back to spiritual life, and through the Messiah, we may be redeemed. So let's hear what the word of the Lord says to Ezekiel in chapter 37. The hand of the Lord was on me, and he brought me out by the Spirit of the Lord and set me in the middle of the valley. It was full of bones. He led me back and forth among them, and I saw a great many bones on the floor of the valley, bones that were dry. He asked me, "Son of man, can these bones live?" I responded, Sovereign Lord, you alone know. Then he said to me, Prophesy to these bones and say to them, Dry bones, hear the word of the Lord. This is what the sovereign Lord says to these bones. I will make breath enter you, and you will come to life. I will attach tendons to you and make flesh come upon you and cover you with skin. I will put breath in you, and you will come to life. Then you will know that I am the Lord. So I prophesied as I was commanded, and as I was prophesying, there was a noise, a rattling sound, and the bones came together bone to bone. I looked, and tendons and flesh appeared on them, and skin covered them, but there was no breath in them. Then the Lord said to me, Prophesy to the breath. Prophesy, Son of Man, and say to it, This is what the sovereign Lord says. Come, breath. Come, breath, from the four winds, and breathe into these slain, that they may live. So I prophesied as he commanded me, and breath entered them. They came to life and stood up on their feet, a vast army. Then he said to me, Son of man, these bones are the people of Israel. They say, Our bones are dried up and our hope is gone. We are cut off. Therefore, prophesy and say to them, This is what the sovereign Lord says. My people, I am going to open your graves and bring you up from them. I will bring you back to the land of Israel. Then you, my people, will know that I am the Lord. When I open your graves and bring you up from them, I will put my spirit in you, and you will live, and I will settle you in your own land. Then you will know that I, the Lord, have spoken, and I have done it, declares the Lord. The word of the Lord came to me, Son of man, take a stick of wood and write on it, belonging to Judah and the Israelites associated with him. Then take another stick of wood and write on it, belonging to Joseph, that is, to Ephraim, and all the Israelites associated with him. Join them together into one stick so that they will become one in your hand. When your people ask you, Won't you tell us what you mean by this? Say to them, This is what the sovereign Lord says. I am going to take the stick of Joseph, which is in Ephraim's hand, and of the Israelite tribes associated with him, and join it to Judah's stick. I will make them into a single stick of wood, and they will become one in my hand. Hold before their eyes the sticks you have written on, and say to them, This is what the sovereign Lord says. I will take the Israelites out of the nations where they have gone. I will gather them from all around and bring them back into their own land. I will make them one nation in the land, on the mountains of Israel. There will be one king over all of them, and they will never again be two nations or be divided into two kingdoms. They will no longer defile themselves with their idols and vile images or with any of their offenses. For I will save them from their sinful backsliding, and I will cleanse them. They will be my people, and I will be their God. My servant David will be king over them, and they will all have one shepherd. They will follow my laws and be careful to keep my decrees. They will live in the land that I gave my servant Jacob, and the land where your ancestors lived. They and their children and their children's children will live forever, and David my servant will be their prince forever. I will make a covenant of peace with them. It will be an everlasting covenant. I will establish them and increase their numbers, and I will put my sanctuary among them forever. My dwelling place will be with them. I will be their God. They will be my people. Then the nations will know that I, the Lord, make Israel holy, when my sanctuary is among them forever. And so there we have this hope that comes from Ezekiel, that God can put tendons and flesh and muscles back on the dry bones of our spirits that are dead and lost, and hard-heartedness can be removed from us, and God can give us back a heart of flesh. And then God can breathe life into our bodies, into our spirits, right? And then we get this prophetic word about the eternal kingdom and God joining the kingdom of Israel back into one nation rather than being split into two divided nations. And then we get the conversation about David being the prince that will reign, right? And so that's kind of the messianic promise. That's this idea that the Messiah is coming from the line of David. I think the very last sentence, the very last verse of this chapter is really interesting. It says this: Then the nations will know that I, the Lord, make Israel holy, when my sanctuary is among them forever. You know, that concept is true in the Old Testament. That concept is true from Genesis forward. But we see it really come to fruition with Jesus. It is the Lord who makes us holy. None of us can do enough good things to tilt the scales in our favor, right? If we show up to the judgment and it's about, Lord, I did enough things to become more holy than I was wicked, or I did enough good things to outweigh the bad things, that's going to pale in comparison with God's holiness. It doesn't even stand up at all. God is going to look at us and go, you weren't perfectly holy. Therefore, depart from me. I never knew you. Except that God is the one who makes Israel holy. We can't make ourselves holy. We can't bring ourselves back from the valley of dry bones. Only God can do that. Only God can make us holy. Only a relationship with Jesus Christ can lead us into forgiveness and righteousness and holiness. And so we have to rely on the Lord, and we have to keep our eyes set on him. We have to trust in his salvation. We have to trust in the work of Jesus Christ in order to be made holy, so that when we come up to the judgment, our sins will have gone before us, and we will be cloaked in the holiness and the righteousness of Jesus, and therefore welcomed into God's presence. So this ends with a word of hope. It ends with this word of encouragement that it is God who does the work. If we will just cling to him and dwell with him, he finishes us. He brings it to completion. So God bless you, Wellspring, and we'll see you for the next one.